today I want to talk to you guys about Elsa from Frozen and why I think that she is an INFJ that has fallen into an introverted loop. So looping is what happens when you get stuck between your primary function or your driver function and your tertiary function, which is a function that you don't really use all of the time. You kind of fall back on it as like a little bit of like a fail-safe or like a little bit of it could provide some additional information, but you're never really meant to drive with it. You're supposed to be driving, obviously, with your driver function, but then also your secondary function, your co-pilot. Like, these two have very different energies. One's going to be introverted, one's going to be extroverted. These are the ones that are going to allow you to be the best self that you can be. But sometimes when we get under stress, or when we feel, like we need to be defensive, or like we've come under attack, or maybe just things aren't quite going our way, we can fall into a loop. And when you're an introvert, that means that you're falling into a loop that puts you very inside your own mind. And when you're an INFJ, it creates this endless loop of thought that can seem very hard to get out of. So what happens is your dominant function of introverted intuition, instead of throwing all of its ideas over to your secondary function of extroverted feeling, instead you're skipping down to your other introverted function, which is introverted thinking. And what happens here is that all of this information that you're gathering with introverted intuition, like all of these ideas and thoughts that you've been pondering and going over, instead of throwing it over to see like what outside information you can get or like how other people are feeling or whatever, you're throwing it down to introverted thinking, which is looking for logic and reason, and it's doing all of that inside of the self instead of looking out. So you're pondering inside your head, you're thinking inside your head, and it throws it back up and it goes around and around and around and around. And each time it passes through, you sink further and further into yourself to the point where it's overwhelming to even try to think about taking in information from anybody else. And I really think this is what's going on with Elsa. We see that Elsa has had her fair share of trauma growing up. She's been pretty much isolated her entire life, and it's led to the point where she really hasn't had much exposure to anybody outside of her parents, like, and a little bit of the castle servants probably. So she can't really exercise that extroverted feeling function, that function that wants to interact with other people, that wants to see how other people are feeling. So because of that, she doesn't really have that sounding board to go off of. So she's naturally just falling back down into that introverted thinking, and it's causing her to just loop endlessly within her introverted self, and it's making it so that yes, she's isolated, but she's becoming more and more isolated within herself to the point where all she wants is to break free of it and just not have to worry about anybody else around her. Everybody around her is just making it worse. They're making it more overwhelming for her, and we see that like demonstrated with her powers. Like, her powers flare up because she's getting like anxious, she's getting stressed, she's worried about what other people are thinking, she's worried that other people are seeing her, and that's because she hasn't been able to like flex that extroverted feeling function. So suddenly when it's coming back into play, she's falling back into that comfort zone of that introverted loop, and it's making her extremely stressed to the point where she just wants out. And when she gets out and when she is able to be alone, she can finally just be herself. She doesn't have to worry about what other people are doing or about what other people are feeling. She can just be her. And she does need to interact with people, but being able to be away from it a little bit helps her clear her mind so she can finally start to feel a little bit more like herself again.